We live in a world where image matters. Everyone edits their story, but women in particular often face pressure to present their past in a way that seems acceptable. That's not unusual, it's almost expected. The problem comes when the edits become strategies, when the truth is reshaped so much that you're left with a version that looks safe but hides the real story. And if you build trust on that, the cost can be high. In this video, I'll show you 7 specific ways women tend to hide their past. Once you understand them, you'll be able to tell the difference between normal privacy and manipulation designed to keep you in the dark. We all know that people have different views on whether the past really matters in a relationship. Some say, it's just the past, let it go, while others insist, your future depends on what's been hidden. Where do you stand? Before we dive deeper, take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and share your opinion in the comments below. Do you believe the past should be revealed completely, or is it better left unsaid? Stick with me, because in just a moment I'll reveal the first tactic women use to shift the focus away from their real number. Number 1. Women often avoid revealing the real number by turning the question back on you. It sounds harmless at first. She might lean in, smile softly, and ask, "Well, how many women have you been with?" The moment you answer, she now has a benchmark. If your number is higher than hers, she feels safe. She doesn't have to say anything more. If your number is lower, she already knows how much she needs to adjust her story. This tactic works because it feels like a fair exchange. It gives the illusion of balance. You asked her, she asked you back. But what's really happening is that she's positioning you to reveal first. She's reading your reaction, calculating what you'll tolerate, and then shaping her response to fit inside that comfort zone. It's less about honesty, more about strategy. Psychologically, this taps into a man's natural desire to be transparent. Most men answer directly because they don't think it's a trick question. But here's the danger. Once you reveal your number, you've surrendered the frame. You've allowed her to set the rules of the conversation. From that moment, you're no longer assessing the truth. You're measuring her story against your own disclosure. The realization here is how subtle this manipulation can be. It doesn't feel like deception. It feels like dialogue. Yet, in reality, it's a carefully orchestrated way to dodge accountability. You walk away thinking, well, she didn't lie, but in truth, she never really answered. Here's what you need to remember. When a woman immediately flips the question back on you, it's often a red flag. It suggests she's not comfortable with the truth, or she's preparing to reshape it. A woman with nothing to hide doesn't need to play verbal chess. She can simply say, "This is my past," without first calculating your tolerance. So what can you do? First, recognize the pattern. If she asks you first, resist the urge to disclose right away. Instead, tell her directly, "I'll answer your question, but I'd like you to go first." That simple adjustment keeps the frame balanced. Second, don't be blinded by the illusion of fairness. Equal exchange is not always honest exchange. The deeper lesson here is that a man who gives up his position too quickly will never get the full truth. A man who maintains his ground, who insists on clarity before disclosure, protects himself. Because in relationships, what's left unsaid is often more dangerous than what's admitted. Number 2, one of the oldest and most effective tactics is simply lying while dressing it up in innocence. Imagine this. You ask her directly about her past, and she pauses, lowers her eyes, and says softly, "Just 2 or 3. The tone is quiet, the body language is shy, and you, as a man, are disarmed. You see the performance of innocence, and you want to believe it. The psychology here is powerful. Men are wired to trust visual cues more than words. When her face projects purity, when her voice sounds hesitant, you fill in the blanks yourself. You convince yourself she must be telling the truth because she looks like someone who wouldn't lie. but appearances are not evidence. What you're seeing is a carefully rehearsed act designed to minimize scrutiny. Here's the harsh truth. When women give numbers, those numbers are rarely accurate. If she says 2 or 3, the real figure could be 2 or 3 times higher. This is not always malicious. It's also rooted in fear of judgment. Society tells women they'll be criticized for admitting too much, so instead of facing rejection, they adjust the story. What you hear is not the past. It's a curated version of the past. Later, when fragments of reality slip through the cracks, the picture changes. You might hear about an old friend who suddenly sounds a lot like someone else she once dated. You might notice inconsistencies between her stories and her timeline. And suddenly, the number she gave no longer adds up. That's when the truth becomes harder to ignore. You weren't listening to her reality, you were watching her act. So how do you protect yourself from falling into this trap? First, detach your judgment from the performance. Innocence can be faked, but consistency is harder to fabricate. Pay attention not just to what she says, but to how her stories align over time. Second, don't let your desire for a good answer cloud your logic. Men often want to hear a small number because it makes them feel secure. But chasing comfort is the fastest way to ignore reality. A woman who values honesty will respect directness. If she minimizes or dodges, that's not just about her past, it's about how she handles truth in the present. A man who sees through the performance saves himself from disappointment later. Remember this. It's not the number that ruins trust. It's the lie behind it. And once a lie enters the foundation of your relationship, every layer built on top is unstable. Number 3. Another tactic that often slips under the radar is what I call the art of rebranding. A fleeting one-night encounter, something casual and quick, suddenly gets upgraded into the title of ex-boyfriend. On the surface, it doesn't sound suspicious. After all, everyone has a few exes. But beneath that label lies a distortion of reality. Here's why this works so effectively. Men process the label boyfriend as commitment. If she tells you she's had 3 exes, your brain translates that into 3 relationships, each presumably with time, investment, and emotional weight. What you don't see is that those relationships may have lasted a single evening or a couple of weeks at most. By rebranding the casual into the serious, she takes a number that might shock you and transforms it into something that sounds respectable. Psychologically, this tactic softens the blow. 3 boyfriends sounds manageable. 10 flings does not. Men tend to value exclusivity, so when the story is reframed as relationships, it appears less reckless and more socially acceptable. It manipulates your perception, not by denying the past, but by rewriting it. The real shock comes when you discover that what you thought were long-term connections were in fact brief encounters in disguise. The betrayal isn't just about the number. It's about realizing the truth was hidden behind a carefully chosen word. That single shift in language, boyfriend instead of hookup, changes how you see her. And once the curtain lifts, trust begins to erode. So how can you guard against this? Pay attention to timelines. If she tells you about an ex, ask, how long did that relationship last? If the answer is vague, a few months, it didn't really matter. Probe deeper. Genuine relationships have stories, shared experiences, key moments, and details that don't sound rehearsed. When the description feels hollow, it's often because the relationship never truly existed. This isn't about interrogating a woman for every detail of her past. It's about protecting yourself from a narrative that's been polished to make you more comfortable. A man who takes words at face value risks building trust on illusions. A man who notices patterns, who questions inconsistencies, builds his security on clarity. Remember this: redefining the past is still a form of hiding it. When a casual night is elevated into an ex-boyfriend, you're not hearing history, you're hearing marketing. And in relationships, believing the sales pitch without checking the product always comes at a cost. Number 4. One of the most common strategies women use to redirect attention is tearing down their past partners while putting you on a pedestal. It sounds flattering at first. She might say, "My ex was awful. He never treated me right. But you're the best man I've ever been with." To most men, that feels like a victory. It feeds the ego, makes you feel chosen, and gives you the illusion of being the exception. But beneath that compliment lies a calculated move. By discrediting her exes, she reshapes her past into something less threatening. If those men were so terrible, then whatever she did with them doesn't really matter, right? And by showering you with praise, she makes you less likely to question the details. Who wants to press for answers when they're being told they're the best? The psychology is simple but effective. Men crave significance. They want to feel like they matter more than the men who came before them. When a woman amplifies your importance, you naturally relax your guard. You think, she's clearly moved on, and I'm different. But here's the problem. The tactic doesn't erase the past. It only distracts you from looking at it clearly. Later, when the same lines begin to sound rehearsed, the picture changes. You might notice that every ex in her story is always the villain, while she plays the role of the innocent. Or you hear the same words repeated, almost as if they've been used before with someone else. In that moment, the praise no longer feels special. It feels scripted. And once you recognize the pattern, trust begins to fade. So what should you do when you're showered with praise that feels too perfect? First, accept the compliment, but don't let it blind you. If every ex is painted as worthless, ask yourself, what does that say about her choices? Second, pay attention to consistency. A woman who truly values you won't need to exaggerate how bad others were. She'll let your connection speak for itself. The lesson here is not to reject flattery, but to recognize when it's being used as a smokescreen. Real intimacy doesn't require you to believe you're the best ever. It requires transparency. If you allow yourself to be lulled by sweet words, you may overlook the very truths that matter most. Remember this: the louder someone insists that the past doesn't matter, the more reason you have to take a closer look. Because in relationships, trust isn't built on how much she elevates you. It's built on how honestly she addresses where she's been. Number 5. Another common tactic women use to cover their past is playing the victim card. Instead of giving you numbers or details, she shifts the focus to a story of pain. She might say, "He treated me badly," or "I went through so much in that relationship." Immediately, the frame of the conversation changes. The moment you hear suffering, your natural instinct as a man is to stop pressing. You don't want to be cruel. You don't want to reopen old wounds. This approach is powerful because it works on empathy. Most men want to be protectors. When a woman presents herself as someone who has been hurt, you instinctively back off. You move from curious to cautious, from asking questions to offering comfort. That shift serves her purpose. The more you focus on her pain, the less you look into the facts of her past. But here's where the danger lies. When every story of the past is told through the lens of being wronged, you don't just get a softened version of the truth, you get a distorted one. The details you need are hidden under layers of sympathy. The ex becomes the villain, she becomes the survivor, and you become the rescuer. By the time you realize what's missing, it may be too late to see the full picture. At first, you might feel noble, thinking you're the man who will finally treat her right. But later, you start to notice inconsistencies. If every man in her past was abusive or cruel, what does that say about her choices? And why do the stories lack specifics, replaced instead with vague claims of mistreatment? The more you examine it, the more you realize that pain is being used as a shield. So how should you handle this? First, don't let compassion blind you to clarity. Being empathetic doesn't mean you stop observing. If her stories are always framed around being the victim, ask yourself what's being left unsaid. Second, remember that a genuine survivor of hardship speaks with consistency and detail. They don't need to dramatize, they simply describe. When the narrative feels exaggerated or rehearsed, it's a sign to stay cautious. The real lesson is this: a relationship built on half-truths, hidden behind pity, cannot last. A woman who values honesty won't need to manipulate your sympathy to cover her history. She'll be vulnerable without being evasive. As a man, your role is not just to protect, it's to discern. Because if you fail to separate genuine vulnerability from strategic storytelling, you risk building trust on a false foundation. Number 6. In today's world, the past isn't just in memories. It's in photos, posts, and digital trails. That's why one of the most calculated tactics is scrubbing social media clean. She deletes pictures, unfollows old connections, and creates a spotless timeline. At first glance, it looks refreshing, almost innocent. You scroll through her profile and think, she must have always been this way. But what you're seeing may not be her real history. It's a curated version, designed to erase what doesn't fit the image she wants you to see. This tactic works because most men don't question an absence of evidence. When you see no trace of a messy past, you assume it never existed. But the truth is, gaps tell stories too. That 2-year period with no photos, no posts, no tags. What really happened during that time? The silence can speak louder than words if you know how to listen. To make the story airtight, many women don't just delete. They create cover narratives. Maybe she claims she lost access to her old account. Maybe she says an ex hacked her profile. Maybe she blames a fresh start after a tough time. These explanations sound reasonable on the surface, but they're also convenient. They provide just enough detail to stop you from digging deeper. Over time, you might notice that her online presence feels too polished. Every photo is recent, every caption crafted, and there's no sign of the normal chaos that comes with a real life lived over years. The more perfect the presentation, the more you should question what's been left out. Because authenticity isn't flawless. It's messy, inconsistent, and full of small details. When those details are missing, there's usually a reason. So how do you protect yourself here? First, treat digital silence as a clue, not as proof of innocence. If entire chapters of her life are missing online, ask gentle but direct questions. What was going on during that time? Second, pay attention to how she reacts when those gaps are mentioned. A woman with nothing to hide will answer with openness. A woman who deflects or grows defensive is signaling more than she realizes. The bigger lesson is this: technology has made hiding the past easier, but it has also made patterns more visible for those who pay attention. A man who observes carefully won't be fooled by a clean slate. He'll know that real trust is built on what remains consistent, not on what's been conveniently erased. Number 7. When all else fails, some women turn to their most reliable defense system, their friends. This is where the cover-up goes beyond her words and becomes a collective effort. Suddenly, it's not just her telling the story, it's an entire circle backing her up. If you ask a question and her friends all repeat the same version, you feel reassured. After all, if multiple people are saying the same thing, it must be true. But in reality, you may be stepping into a carefully coordinated narrative. This works because of something deeply rooted in female social dynamics, the sisterhood bond. Women often protect each other, sometimes even more than they protect their own relationships. The logic is simple. I'll back you up now, and you'll back me up later. That solidarity creates a shield strong enough to deflect suspicion. and to a man on the outside, it feels nearly impossible to challenge. At first, this can feel comforting. You meet her friends, and they all seem supportive. They laugh at the same stories, confirm the same details, and act as if they've known you forever. But after a while, patterns emerge. The stories sound too rehearsed, too identical, as if they've been practiced in advance. Real memories are messy, full of different perspectives. When every voice sounds like a script, it's not authenticity, it's choreography. The moment of realization often comes when a small inconsistency slips out. A friend mentions a trip that doesn't align with the story you were told. Another recalls a night that suddenly casts doubt on the timeline. These cracks, though small, reveal that the truth you've been handed is more fragile than it appeared. And once you see one crack, you start to see them everywhere. So how can you protect yourself? First, don't assume that consensus equals truth. A group can lie just as easily as one person. Second, look for differences, not similarities. Real experiences vary in detail. When everyone repeats the same version word for word, it's often rehearsed. Third, trust your instincts. If something feels staged, it probably is. The larger lesson here is critical. A relationship should stand on its own, not on a wall of protection built by outsiders. If a woman needs her friends to help defend her past, it raises a deeper question. What is she so afraid you'll find out? A man who sees through the illusion of collective storytelling won't just protect himself. He'll also understand a fundamental truth. Loyalty between friends is strong, but in a healthy relationship, loyalty to honesty should be stronger. We've walked through 7 ways women hide their past, from comparing numbers, to playing innocent, to rewriting casual nights as relationships, from tearing down old partners while putting you on a pedestal, to using the victim card, to scrubbing the digital trail clean, and even rallying friends to support the same story. Each tactic has one thing in common. It's designed to protect her image and control how you see her history. The deeper truth is this: women judge men by their future, his career, his drive, his ability to provide. Men, on the other hand, must judge women by their past, her choices, her patterns, her ability to commit. That balance is uncomfortable, but it's real. If you ignore her past, you risk building your future on illusions. If you see clearly, you protect yourself from investing in someone who doesn't align with your values. This isn't about demonizing women. It's about protecting men from walking blind into relationships where truth has been edited. A high-value man doesn't just chase attraction. He looks for honesty, for consistency, for character. And a woman who can't be transparent about her history is showing you something about her present. The lesson is simple. A man who ignores the past will pay for it in the future. A man who sees clearly will always stay in control. If you take nothing else from this, remember that clarity is power. The more you understand what's behind the mask, the more freedom you have to choose wisely. So here's what I want you to do next. If this message resonated with you, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this video with another man who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Have you ever caught a woman hiding her past? Your story could save another man from the same mistake. Stay sharp, stay aware, and above all, stay in control.